So we are going to explore a practice that when I learned it, it was called easy rest. And this was the name that my teacher Shinzen Young gave it. Now, I don't think he uses that name anymore, but when I learned it, it was called easy rest. And that name just stuck for me. I think it's great. And so this practice could potentially feel easy and restful. It could also not. We'll have the intention to let it be as easy and restful as possible, which means that we won't struggle too much. We won't try to quiet the mind if the mind is active. The mind can do what the mind wants to do. And we'll just continue to bring attention back to the practice that we are working with. So there's two pieces of it, and we'll work with one and then the other, and then we'll put them together. And most likely we'll do this again next week, this practice. And so it's going to give you an opportunity to give it a try and then bring potential questions that come up over the next week if you're using it. Or, if you're joining, if you're not here live and you're joining later, you can comment or message with questions, comments, and then we'll do it again. And I can respond to any of those that came in. And for people that come live, we'll do that. We'll do that live, not recorded. So traditionally, we practice with an upright, with a long spine. And so the postures are sitting with a upright spine, long spine, standing, or lying down. And while you are always welcome to use whatever posture is supportive for you and is most makes it most possible to be here and do this practice, because we're working with technique and we're maybe going to be a little bit ruthless with our practice this week. I encourage you to explore, what is it like to bring in a more formal meditation posture? Again, it's completely optional, meaning you can opt out of this suggestion. But if you would like to try a seated posture, you can, obviously do this on the floor on a meditation cushion. You can also do it on a chair like I am. And see, I have support behind me because that's what my body needs right now. That's how I tend to sit when I teach. When I practice on my own, I don't sit in a chair. I sit on the floor on a meditation cushion. The idea, if you're sitting on the floor, is that you want the butt kind of up and the pelvis tilting down, and that's going to take pressure out of the back. If sitting isn't something that's going to work for your body, then I encourage lying down with a nice long spine, so flat corpse pose, being aware that it's easy to fall asleep, especially with this practice that we're going to do, because it can be easy and restful. So it's possible that you could fall right to sleep, which is fine if that's what your body is needing. But if habitually you find that you fall asleep during meditation, maybe try sitting up and see what happens. Okay, so settling into a posture that's going to work for you, maybe taking into account what I just shared. Easy rest is made up of focusing on rest in the body, so relaxation, or even a kind of emotional peace, and focusing on a restful experience in the visual space. Now, this can absolutely be done with eyes open. I'm going to guide it with eyes closed, the closed eye version. And the idea here is that we are gazing into the visual space with our eyes closed. And if images arise, we are not fixating on those and we're not meditating on those. So sometimes we do practices where the image material is the object of focus. And for this practice, we are looking through, around, under any images that arise, over, to the side, any images that arise. Doesn't mean you won't get pulled into the images, and the work will be to just untangle and come back to what in Shinzen system used to be called blank, which is the gray scale, which is the light and or dark in front of, behind your closed eyes. It can look like static. It can look kind of splotchy. So it's not that it's like imageless, but we're not interested in the content-based image, in the sort of daydreamy image. And so while you may see a kind of a static or a wavy sort of pattern, I mean, sometimes there can be sort of like a sacred geometry thing that happens for people. If that happens for you, again, rather than getting caught up in like, ooh, this cool thing is happening, just keep getting interested in the restful quality of what's occurring. And you might choose to pay particular attention if you notice any bright white or any dark, dark black. Now, if this comes up for you, these are kasinas. There's a whole practice around that, many practices around that. If you happen to notice a little dot of bright white or a little dot of dark, dark black, get curious about it, but notice that if you really sort of drill in on it, it most likely will vanish. There's sort of like a hold on loosely. Is that journey? I think that's journey. Hold on loosely sort of quality to it where you kind of allow it to draw you in. So this isn't necessarily going to happen for you, but I'm putting that out there just in case it does. Another thing about gazing into this sort of blank, though it's not necessarily blank, space, is that the eyes can become very tense and tight because we're sort of like, I'm going to look into this. I'm going to keep focusing on this. And it can create a headache and it can create eye pain. And so I really deeply encourage you to keep the eyes relaxed as you do this practice. So to allow what you're experiencing to come to you rather than like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to grab it. And this also, you know, comes back to that theme of easy rest. So take a moment, if your eyes are closed, and open them for just a moment and look around or just look in front of you. Just take in the light of the space. Then close your eyes. What do you see? That's what we're focusing on. Now, you might see an after image that will fade. You might see, you know, other imagery pop up. That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in just that space that exists outside of image. Could be as simple as just looking at the back of your eyelids. Could become a much more, I don't know, a deeper experience as well. Not that looking at the back of the eyelids isn't deep. So maybe try it one more time, opening the eyes, letting in light. And then closing the eyes. Gazing into and allowing it to gaze into you, this gray scale or this black or this splotchiness or this waviness or this static. Keeping the eyes relaxed. Good. So I wanted to just have us do a little kind of demo of that before we go into the full practice, but we're actually going to start with relaxation because it will help with having the eyes relaxed as we do the kind of sea rest experience. So the current labels, I believe, that are used in the basic mindfulness that are used in Shinzen system are see rest, feel rest. So we'll just go ahead and use those labels for today. You can also use whatever labels you want. the original were blank and relax. So my mind, it's so like ingrained to use those labels that I tend to use those, but we'll try to be up to date and we'll use see rest, feel rest, or even just rest. And you know, if you're focusing on this dog hair, this rest in your visual space, or if you're focusing on the rest at the body level. So it can be see rest, feel rest, or it can just be rest. And when we bring the two techniques together, we can kind of let go of the sort of differentiation, just kind of let it all be rest. And in which case you might just shift to using the label rest. Now you're hearing me say label, and that's not necessarily something that you've done with me before. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. So the label is just there to facilitate mindfulness. It's not a mantra, and it's not a command. It's really just, it's a support. So if it's not supportive, do not use it. It's not necessary. It's there if it's helpful. And so if you were using the label, it might sound something like this inside your mind. See rest. See rest. Feel rest. See rest. Feel rest. So what I was doing there is I was allowing for a free floating between the two, which is one way we can work with this. The labels are neutral, they're kind, they're gentle, perhaps. They're not like see rest, see rest, see rest, see rest, see rest, see rest, right? It's not a command, it's not a mantra. It's just there to facilitate the mindfulness of the experience. And so you can try it, and then you can let it go if it doesn't work for you. So I've given you that option. I will probably remind you of it a time or two, but it's really up to you, you being your own best teacher and guide, to decide whether the labels will be supportive for you in this practice. And keeping in mind, over this week, if you choose to explore this practice, you can try it with the labels, you can try it without the labels, you can see what feels most in alignment for you. Okay. So possibly you've been in your meditation posture this whole time that I've been talking. Possibly you've found some relative stillness. Now I haven't, I've been moving because I tend to kind of gesticulate and move my body while I speak. But perhaps you found some relative stillness. Perhaps it's possible to be in stillness. So we'll keep working towards that, while knowing that it's absolutely 100% okay to move if you need to move. And just during this time, choose to do it as mindfully as possible, as intentionally as possible. Right? The opposite of all the kind of gesticulating I do. Yeah, intentional. Intentionally shifting the leg if the knee needs some space while you sit. Intentionally scratching that itch if you absolutely need to. Okay. So we'll begin with feel rest. We are drawing our attention to areas in the body where we are experiencing rest, physical relaxation, emotional peace, even just a neutral sort of area that doesn't feel super active. And as much as possible, we are feeling the sensation from the sensation rather than sending the meditator down from the head. And that may or may not be available to you today. But if possible, if you're noticing rest in the leg, really experience that rest from the leg. Letting go of that extra step of I'm meditating and I'm going to send attention from somewhere around my head down to my leg. Then all we're doing here is being with this sensation of rest in the body, feeling it. Concentrating on it. We're using a concentration muscle here. And if it's supportive and helpful, we're using the label feel rest. Feel rest. You can use that label in your mind or out loud. Feel rest. This could be a small area of the body that you're experiencing rest. It could also be your entire body or anything in between. It could be deep inside your body. It could be on the surface of your skin. Feel rest. If it's feeling challenging to find rest in the body, you might intentionally relax. And we often do that here. We relax from the head to the toes and the fingertips. So you could take a sweep through the body, softening and relaxing. You could also breathe into particular areas. Or you could visualize those areas softening, melting, relaxing. You could also tighten up and then release. So doing that, tightening up and then releasing, there is that experience of feel rest that comes in as soon as you release what you're tightening. So it's another way to start to attune to feel rest in the body. And if you tend to experience a lot of emotional activation in the body when you meditate, you can look for the areas where you're not experiencing that emotional activation. The areas where there's emotional rest, emotional peace. Might even be that right next to a big storm of emotion, there's a beautiful pocket of peace. You can focus your attention there, feeling from that peace. Lots and lots of options here. This feel rest practice is also a resource, which we do all the time. So a version of resource. Continuing to come back to feel rest. By the way, you can have a nice long spine and be upright and still be quite relaxed. It takes practice, but it's very possible. Some of my most peak states of relaxation occurred with an upright posture, long spine. So you can absolutely stay with this if you'd like. Just keep working with feel rest if it's really feeling good or just feeling like where you want to be right now. Or you might shift into sea rest, which we practiced just a little bit of at the top. So attention is now at the area around the eyes. And actually, let's take a moment and bring this feel rest into the eye area. So really intentionally relax the eyes. Imagine the entire eye area, the brow, sort of muscles around the eyes, all relaxing. It comes to mind to me in this moment that the teeny tiny bit of Botox I get helps helps this area around my eyes to relax. So whether you are injecting poison into your face or not, relaxing around the eyes, and relaxing the eyes themselves, all those little muscles around the eyes. And then coming into sea rest. So we're gazing into that relative blank space. And if you're having trouble contacting it, you can just go ahead and do what we did earlier, which is open the eyes and then closing them and noticing what's there. Again, with this practice, we are looking around, over, under, through any images that arise, because image is not our object of focus here in this practice. The space in which image arises and passes is our object of focus. So rather than the form, we are exploring the emptiness. Which can be as simple as the back of your eyelids, or perhaps a more expansive experience. Again, back of the eyelids can be expansive as well. There's just different ways to experience this sea rest thing. And maybe you're using the label to help facilitate mindfulness, sea rest. Sea rest. Label to acknowledge what it is that you're focused on. Space between the label to focus, to soak in. Sea rest. If this technique is easy, available to you, you might get interested in the periphery. Does this rest wrap all the way around you? Is this rest limitless? You might also get interested in any particularly dark or light spots in that gentle attention way, holding on loosely. You also might just be gazing right just in front of you into that empty expanse. Allowing images to come and go, no need to fight them, but we're not engaging, we're not getting tangled. When we inevitably do get tangled in mental talk or mental image, we notice that's happening. We celebrate that little mini awakening, that moment of unconsciousness, awakening from it. And we come back to our object of focus, see, rest. Now you might stay here with see rest if this is particularly interesting or restful. Or you might open up to both see rest and feel rest and maybe just let yourself free float between these two objects of focus, moving back and forth. Or if you like, you might let go of this differentiation between the two and just focus on rest. Rest in that visual space, rest in the body. And maybe what starts to happen is that rest around your eyes dissolves into that rest in the visual space, the rest in the jaw and neck starts to dissolve into that visual space, and that visual space starts to dissolve into the chest, the abdomen, and so on. There's a merging of these experiences, letting go of separation between see rest and feel rest. And it's all simply rest. 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 So continuing with the practice in whatever way is available and interesting and supportive for you. Maybe it's just focusing on sea rest or just feel rest. Maybe it's the sort of free floating between the two or intentionally moving between the two. Or maybe it's this kind of merging of the techniques, letting go of the perceived separation. And in this last moment, how might this be easier? Easy rest. Maybe the part of you that wants to get it right could just step back a bit just for a moment. That part's important, here for a reason, but maybe it just wants to give a little bit of space. Or maybe you're gripping in the eyes or the hands and let that soften. Or maybe you've been struggling to try to quiet the mind. And you can let go of that and instead just drop into the practice of easy rest. Beautiful. So you might take a deep breath or two. You might bring a little bit of movement into the body. Maybe there's a stretch or a yawn that wants to happen. Little pup on my lap just woke up. He was very much into that easy rest. He was deep in it. Yeah. Yes, you little sweetie boy. Maybe just looking around your space for a moment, acclimating to here and now, especially if that took you to a particularly expansive place, potentially. Maybe just, oh, here I am. Here's my walls and my ceiling and my floor. Here's my body here and now in this time and space. Okay. Thank you for practicing with me.